Hey, how's it going, everyone? So, Sanitrist here, just going to talk a little bit about Blood Death Knight and the specs that I use when I'm going through dungeons. We're going to talk about a survivability spec and then also a damage spec. So, for survivability, um, this is basically the tree that I always use anytime I'm doing some kind of high-end content where my end goal is to be as tanky as possible, to heal as much as possible, to have as many defensives as possible, to have the least likelihood of dying. So to start out, we're going to talk about the actual class tree. Nothing really crazy here. This is what I run basically all the time in Mythic dungeons. Key points here is I like to run this 3% leech, but then that's the first point I take out if I'm going to run anti-magic barrier, and if I'm going to run AMZ, or if I'm going to throw points into Grip of the Dead, which is very good depending on what kind of modifiers you have for the week, like Spitefuls. It's very good for Spitefuls. So, big things in Mythic Plus dungeons, especially if you're pugging, is you want to have Mind Freeze, you want to have Blinding Sleep, and you want to have Asphyxiate, right? You want to have a kick, you want to have your stun, and then you want to have your AoE Disorient, because so many of these dungeons, especially on high fortified keys, the things that brick them and the things that kill people is random party cast abilities and AoE abilities that don't get stunned or kicked, right? And from then on out, it's just pretty much basic stuff, right? Picking up Unholy Embrace, so our Lichborn lasts a little longer and also gives us 15% DR. Making sure we pick up Death's Echo, so we have 2 grips. We have 2 charges of Death and Decay, and we have 2 charges of Death's Advance, because as anyone who's played Death Knight will tell you, we are so slow. We are super slow. So those 2 charges of Death's Advance are great. Moving over to the right side of the tree. Again, your basic setup. What we're really going to talk about is the options that change depending on if you're more focused on survivability or damage, some of the talents that I think are kind of traps, and why I don't like them. Okay, so this is all just basic stuff we get at the top, right? We have to get Heart Strike, we get Morrowind, of course, and Blood Boil. Now, if we want damage, we would stick to the right side of the tree, and we would go 2 and 2 improved Heart Strike to give us 30% increased Heart Strike damage. But for survivability, we're going to throw those points into improved Vampiric Blood. So Vampiric Blood's healing and absorb amount is increased by 10% and duration by 4 seconds. Then moving down the tree right here, I stick on all 3 of these, right? A lot of people you'll see not take Foul Bulwark, they'll take Heartbreaker instead. The reason I take Foul Bulwark is because I do not run Fallen Crusader. I have it on right now because I was doing damage last night in a raid, but I normally run Stone Skin Gargoyle, right? So with Fallen Crusader, I have 514k. With Stone Skin Gargoyle, that goes up to almost 550k HP. And so then when I hover around, I try to stick as close to 10 stacks of Bone Shield as I can. That gives me another 54k, that puts me up to 600k. Before I pop Vampiric Blood, before I have Priest buff, before I have anything like that, I'm sitting at 600k HP. And when we look at Death Strike, always giving us a minimum of 8.5% of our maximum health. The more health I have, the bigger shield I can make, even if I'm Death Striking when I haven't taken very much damage. Okay. Bone Shield increasing haste by 10%, that's a must-have. Haste is super important to us. The more haste we have, the more Heart Strikes we get out, the more Runic power we generate, the more Blood Strikes. The more Death Strikes we get out, right? And that is the core thing we do, right? It's get my Bone Shield charges up, which depends on runes. Rune regeneration is handled by haste. Heart Strike to get Runic power, and then Death Strike to heal myself. That's our entire core gameplay. So the more haste we can get, the better off we are, and it's why we have so much stuff built into the spec to give us haste, and in the 4-set, 2-set. And then Reinforced Bones, increasing our armor, that just increases our survivability off the rip, right? On the right side, there's not really any good options other than what we've taken here. right? Hemostasis is core to the gameplay. Each enemy hit by Blood Boil, increasing damage and healing done by your next Death Strike by 8%, stacking up to 5 times. That means in a pool of 5 enemies, I press Blood Boil, and now my next Death Strike is going to deal 40% more damage and heal me for 40% more. Okay? Relish in Blood, basically when we get that free Death and Decay proc, it's heals us per bone shield charge we have, which is another reason why I like doing a very high bone shield kind of playstyle. Instead of hovering around 5, I try to hover 10 as best I can. And you gain 10 runic power. Do I think this is fantastic? Not really. I would honestly prefer to have Perseverance of the Ebon Blade to get 8% verse for 6 seconds anytime we drop it. The issue is that takes 2 points to get down the tree, and we need to get to these things. So we stick with the 1 point in Relish in Blood, because it is helpful. Do I think it's ideal? But it gets us down the tree, and it's not a bad talent. Rapid Decomposition. It just gives us extra damage by our Blood Plague and our Death and Decay, dealing damage 18% more often. So that's extra damage, that's extra health leached, and it's extra threat, right? Then we come down here to Coagulopathy. When you Blood Plague someone, right? So when you Blood Boil and you put Blood Plague on enemies, they take increased damage from your Death Strike and from you, and it increases the damage of your Blood Plague by 30% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. So what that basically means is smash this button in pools at least once every 8 seconds. We should honestly be doing it much more often than that, since it's our main AoE damage, it's our main AoE threat, and it only has a 5.9 second recharge with 2 charges. So we should be smashing that button pretty much on cooldown, not only for this, but also so we can stack up the damage and healing of our Death Strikes. Voracious, it's just a Death Strike buff, right? Healing is increased by 15% and grants you 10% leech for 8 seconds. That should always be up. The only time you should not have that up is at the beginning of the dungeon or whenever there's more than 8 seconds between pulls. But so we should always be rocking around with 10% leech when we're fighting. Sanguine Ground, you deal 6% more damage and receive 5% more healing. That was actually just buffed. It was 5% more damage, 5% more healing. They buffed it up to 6% more damage just because we were kind of struggling damage-wise for a while here in Dragonflight, trying to keep up with prot warriors and especially prot paladins, right? So that paired with our 2 charges of Death and Decay is going to allow us to have very good uptime on our Death and Decay, right? And I'll probably make a video talking about weak ores, but this is one of the most important weak ores I think you can have as a Blood Death Knight. It's something tracking your Death and Decay timing. So this goes down again, and we're fighting, we're doing our thing, we're kiting around, we're trying to stay in our Death and Decay as best as we can. We're dropping it on cooldown, and we can get basically 4 in a row if we time it perfectly, where we always have our Heart Strike hitting up to 5 targets and cleaving, and we have our extra 6% damage, 5% healing, and extra 5% haste from Unholy Ground. So that's a 5% healing, 6% damage, 5% haste, and it causes our main attacking ability to cleave 5 targets. Right? It normally only hits our main target and one other unless we're standing inside of our Death and Decay. Alright, and this is a survivability build. So down here, I've seen different people do different things with this. But when it comes to survivability, Iron Heart, right? Blood Shield's duration increased by 2 seconds and it absorbs 20% more. Right, so I Death Strike. It heals me for 30% of all damage I've taken in the last 5 seconds. And then we get 42.6% of that amount as a physical damage absorption shield. But then I'm also going to get that buffed by an additional 20%. So you're basically looking at close to 50% of that from the 30% healing. So basically a shield for 15 to 20% of the damage we've taken. And then, because this is a survivability build, we really focus into Umbilicus Eternus and buffing our Vampiric Blood. So we come up here, we have improved Vampiric Blood, which we already talked about, which increases the healing and absorb amount, right? And if you're not familiar, Embrace Undeath increases maximum health by 30%, increasing all healing and absorbs received by 40% for 14 seconds. That's at 40% because we have the increased 10%. Normally it's 30. But so, if we're sitting at our 600k HP, I smash this button, I get another third of my HP. I'm sitting at like 800 and some change. If I have priest buff on top of that, I'm at like 840k HP, right? I'm starting to get close to 1,000,000 HP there. That's awesome. And it's going to increase all healing and absorbs received. So that's not just us healing ourselves. It's not just our absorbs. It's also going to increase hots from a Resto Druid. It's going to increase any healing and power word shield we get from a Disc Priest. And then a healing class that we don't really hear a lot about that plays super well with Death Knight. I think Disc Priest plays the best. But Resto Shaman, when they put down their Ring of Life, where everyone's health gets redistributed to be even, if you are a Resto Shaman playing with a Blood Death Knight, you should always make sure that Blood Death Knight is in that. Try to give them a heads up you're going to do it, because we pop this, right? So it increases our maximum health, so then you get that extra 30% redistributed. And then if you do it right, you can smash 4 to 5 death strikes in that time, doing huge healing, and then basically I get help, and then my health gets redistributed. I get more health that gets redistributed again. You're basically allowing that Death Knight to use his Death Strike and his healing cooldowns to heal the entire party. But so we're focused on that. We're going to reduce the cooldown of Vampiric Blood by 2 seconds per 10 runic power spent. And our Death Strike costs 40 runic power. Now, of course, at 5 stacks of Bone Shield, where is it? Yeah, well, you have at least 5 Bone Shield charges. The cost of Death Strike reduced by 5. Additionally, maximum runic power increased by 10. So we're going to get this very often. You will basically have this every pull in a Mythic Plus dungeon at a higher key. You know, talking like 15, 16s and higher than that, right? And then at the bottom, after Vampiric Blood expires, you absorb damage equal to 5 times the damage your Blood Plague dealt during Vampiric Blood. So that stacks back into this, increasing our Blood Plague damage, right? This can be a very hefty absorb. This can get very big and be very nice. Now, the left side of the tree. Mark of Blood, maybe for PvP. PvE, it is not good, right? Damaging auto attacks will heal their victim for 3%. I've looked into a lot of the dungeons thinking, maybe no coup defensive with those archers that just randomly will attack people in the party. I can throw this on. It'll reduce the damage it deals to the party a little bit. No, those aren't considered auto attacks. They're considered casted abilities, so it doesn't affect it. I have not found anywhere where this could be decent, because if you're using it for yourself, it's always outclassed by Tombstone. Consume up to 5 Bone Shield charges. For each charge consumed, gain 6 runic power and absorb damage equal to 6% of your maximum health. There's that maximum health again, right? Playing into our Vampiric Blood, giving us 30% more. Playing into Foul Bulwark, giving us 10% more. Playing into Running Rune of the Stone Skin Gargoyle, giving us 5% more HP. Down here, Heart Rend, you always pick this up. Heart Strike has a chance to increase the damage of your next Death Strike by 20%. You can track this with a weak aura. I really don't. It's just sort of like gravy on top damage. If you really want to min-max damage, then like single target, you could Heart Rend until you get this proc. Then as soon as you get that proc, Death Strike. If you really want to min-max your damage, and so you could set up a weak aura to track the aura of when you get this buff. I just kind of let it happen naturally in my gameplay and don't really alter my rotation around it, and it's just kind of gravy on top damage. This right here, Purgatory. I've heard people say that this is a trap talent. This is not a trap talent. An unholy pact that prevents fatal damage, instead absorbing incoming healing equal to the damage prevented, lasting 3 seconds. If any healing absorption remains when this effect expires, you will die. It only occurs every 4 minutes. So basically what this is if your HP is lowered under 0, Then for 3 seconds, however far under 0 you went, you get a healing absorb shield. That absorb shield must be healed through either by yourself or the healer or a mix of both in 3 seconds or you will die. So if I go to 0 and then I take 50k extra damage on top of that, I now have to heal back 50k to live and be at 0 HP. So it sounds kind of like, is that really that good? Well, here's the thing. If I'm sitting at 600, 700k HP and something kills me, I just got smacked really hard. So my Death Strike is going to heal me for 30% of that damage. So if you can Death Strike a couple times, hit a pot, hit a health stone, have the healer drop a cooldown on you, you will extremely quickly bust through that heal absorb shield, and then you still have all that damage because you have 5 seconds past the damage taken to heal for it. You can get back to maximum HP, busting some cooldowns, getting some extra runic power and stuff, right? So this is not a trap talent. Playing Blood Death Knight can be a little scary for some people just because we are prone to one shot, because the vast majority of our damage mitigation is after the fact mitigation. You take damage, you heal it back, you get an absorb shield based on what you heal. The issue is, what happens when I take so much damage I die before I can heal it back? Purgatory is the answer. I can't tell you how many high-end keys this is saved. If you go into the last trash pool of Temple of the Jade Serpent on like a 19 or 20 fortified key and you don't have this, like rip the key. Right, because unless your healer is on top of it, unless you're super on top of it, doing some crazy kiting, and people are CCing, you could do it without it, sure. In a pug group, this is going to save you on that pool 90% of the times you do it. But so this is my survivability tree. Oh, and of course we pick up Rune Tap, right? Because it's a 25-second recharge, 2 cast, 20% DR. And it's very good for stacking with other DRs, right? We can stack it with Lichborn. So now instead of 15%, I'm at 35% DR for 4 seconds, and then it goes down to 15% for the rest of the time, the other 8 seconds. Some things that I think are kind of traps, right? Right here, consumption, strike all enemies in front of you, deals high damage, heals you for 150% of the damage dealt, reduce damage beyond 8 targets. There's very few times where using a global on this would give you more healing than Death Strike would, right? And the times that it would give you more healing, it doesn't play into your mastery at all. It doesn't give you an absorb shield. So you're immediately going to get smacked for more damage after you use it. So I do not take it when I'm trying to heal. Heartbreaker. Heart Strike generates 1 additional runic power. I see people take this. I see people take Leeching Strike. And I think the main thing is that they want to get to Blood Tap. Blood Tap used to be kind of core to playing Death Knight, right? When I played it in Lich King, whenever I played it in Kata, whenever I came back in the last season of Shadowlands, I was using Blood Tap. And it looks pretty good. 2 charges, 1 minute recharge. I smash it, it gives me a free rune. And the recharge time reduced by 2 seconds when a bone shield charge is consumed. So basically every 1.5 to 2.5 seconds, I'm going to drop 2 seconds off of it. So really you're looking at about a 30 to 40 second recharge time. Looks very good. Here's the issue. In order to get to it, we're going to have to take something else we don't want and then put a point in that. And there's nothing here I'm willing to take a point away from. And if you're playing properly, you don't need this. Leeching Strike. Heart Strike heals you for 0.5% health to each enemy you hit while affected with Blood Plague. Now, I've been talking about having high health pools and how I love that and it's so good and everything. The issue here is that if I'm fighting 8 enemies, my Heart Strike's only going to heal me for 4% of my HP. That's going to be very negligible. And anywhere you take a point from, you're losing more than you're gaining, right? 4% of my HP, or I can have a point in Shattering Bone, which is gonna basically be tripled because we talked about how our Death and Decay, we can keep 100% uptime on it 4 times in a row in a pool. That's not including the free cast we get of it, right? And so it's going to be tripled. So you're looking at let's just call it 2.5k damage, right? And so then if I'm sitting at roughly 20% leech, a fifth of that, that's 500 HP right there every time I lose a bone shield charge, right? Per enemy. So in a set of 4 enemies, I can either heal for 2% of my maximum health, or I can get 2k healing off my leech and deal damage. Right? So there's just nothing I can find that warrants putting points into this. Anti-magic shell healing you for 100% of the damage it absorbs. I would say there's a few fights where that could be pretty good. Temple of the Jade Serpent comes to mind with the third boss. The kick and dodge healing absorb amount she puts on you, and then that last trash pool. I could see this being pretty good, but again, it takes 2 points to get to, and there's nothing I want to sacrifice. We didn't talk about Dancing Rune Weapon, but Dancing Rune Weapon isn't as central to the playstyle as it was in Shadowlands, but it's still very good, right? We pop it, we get 40% parry chance, and then it mimics all of our abilities, including Blood Boil. So we can get 3 stacks of Blood Plague on something, and then, oh, we remember Umbilicus and Turnus. It's going to give us 5 times the damage our Blood Plague dealt while Vampiric Blood is going. And we get 3 stacks of it on everything if I do it with Dancing Rune Weapon popped. So there's a lot of places where at the beginning of the pool, I will pop Vampiric Blood, and then immediately on the next global, Dancing Rune Weapon and Blood Boil. Because I'm getting a lot of healing then, and then I'm also going to get a very big shield. So that's basically our survivability build. And then we're going to look at a more damage-focused build. This is what I'll run if I'm helping people run lower keys, like a 2 up to like a 12 or a 13. We don't really worry about Vampiric Blood because I don't need it. I have enough cooldowns on lower keys to survive through my Icebound Fortitude and my Anti-Magic Shell, and then just my self-healing. So this part of the tree stays pretty similar, except we go ahead and throw that extra point to Shattering Bone to just increase the damage of that, as opposed to having Rune Tap. We save 3 points here, and those 3 points we're going to put 1 in Gorfiend's Grasp, and we're going to put 1 into Tightening Grasp. That's going to give us a 5% damage increase for 15 seconds, also reduce its cooldown by 30 seconds, so it's at a 1 minute cooldown. We're going to lose Purgatory, and then over here we are going to pick up Consumption just for the damage, right? Just for the fact I can smack everything in front of me every 30 seconds for 10k, and it doesn't deal reduced damage until we get beyond 8 targets. And I'm probably going to be pulling very big in lower keys because I can survive it, so that damage does become good enough for us to take it. And then these 2 points we had improved Vampiric Blood, we swap those over to get our Heart Strike to deal 30% increased damage like we talked about earlier. Everything else in the tree stays pretty much the same because it's pretty core. We lose Purgatory because I'm not scared of dying. And then Bone Storm, we didn't talk about Bone Storm because I just don't see the point in it. Whirl of Bone and Gore batters all nearby enemies, dealing shadow damage every 1 second, healing you for 3% of your maximum health every time it deals damage. Lasts 1 second per 10 runic power spent. This could be good if it wasn't for the fact that the damage isn't worth the point with the cooldown. Isn't worth it with the cooldown, in my opinion, as opposed to taking Bloodshot when our Blood Shield is active, dealing 25% increased physical damage. So that's on our Consumption, and that's on our Heart Strikes, and it's on our Death Strikes, and it's on Morrowrend, right? We get 25% increased damage, and in lower keys, we'll have that shield up a lot because we're just not taking that much damage. And then it also uses runic power, and the healing is outclassed by Deathstrike, right? Why would I spend 100 runic power to do this healing when I could get maybe slightly less healing off of 3 Death Strikes, depending on how big of a pool size I'm doing? But I also get the mastery effect off my Death Strike. We don't get mastery off this, so it's just not worth using. But this is the damage spec. And then over here on the class spec, let's just talk about some things, right? Let's talk about when you would change this, when you would do something a little different. In a bigger, more controlled group where you have plenty of kicks and stuns, you might be able to lose Asphyxiate. And then you also might want to lose Leech, right? So if we close this and we open up my gear, 412 item level, don't make fun of me, I still haven't upgraded some things. And no, I haven't got a Windscar drop, but I have a Storm Eater's Leech roll, so pretty good, right? I sit at 10% Leech with this extra 3% from my spec. Because of this, I go up to 20% basically at all times. And then I can pop Lichborn to go up to 30% Leech for 12 seconds when Lichborn is active. So I have plenty of Leech. So if I need to, boom, I can drop that point. And then usually what ends up happening is Temple of the Jade Serpent on Tyrannical Keys. I pick up Anti-Magic Barrier to reduce the cooldown by 20 seconds and increases absorb amount by 40%. It's great because there's so many mobs in there that do shadow damage to you that just trucks. It's great for the third boss for that hit she does because, man, high Tyrannical Keys, it hurts. And then you immediately have to run away to get out of the AoE around her, so you can't Death Strike to get it back. You now have a healing Absorb shield, and you have a dot on you. And if your healer isn't paying attention or can't cope, you're going to trigger your Purgatory or die. Or we can pick up AMZ. That's going to be good for, think like Tyrannical, Halls of Valor. For the second boss, if you kill the first boss and then head left, especially with the strat, the more expedient strat being to keep her in the lightning side twice, you lust the first one, let the healer go through it and deal with it, and then the second one you drop anti-magic zone inside the bubble, reducing magic damage taken. Everyone pops defensives, the healer pops their cooldowns. It's much easier for them to get through, especially when you're reducing the damage by 20%. And then, like we talked about, you can also pick up Grip of the Dead, reducing movement speed by 90%, decaying 10% by every second. Because as we talked about, you should have very close to 100% uptime on your Death and Decay as blood. And so on Spiteful Week, where when you kill a mob, a Spiteful pops out, and then it starts chasing people around. This is great to keep them all together, to keep them slowed, and to let everyone nuke them down, to let your melee have time to run away from them if they get looked at, right? Take a look at a few things in here. So, Unholy Bond, increasing the effectiveness of your Runeforge effects by 10%. It's just not enough to warrant the point. 10% is just not enough. Maybe if you were running Fallen Crusader, which I personally don't run. But, Blood Draw, when you fall below 30% health, you drain 15.6k from nearby enemies. Can only occur once every 3 minutes. Super long cooldown. And honestly, the only thing you would put those 2 points in is, instead of Will of Necropolis, damage taken below 30% health reduced by 35%. Here's the thing. This helps you get out of Purgatory. Right? And a 35% DR at higher keys is going to be much better than 45k health. You're going to suck from everything around you. Right? And I think the internal cooldown on this is 2.5 minutes instead of 3 minutes. So this is just preferred in my opinion. Death Pact heals you 50% of your maximum health, but absorbs incoming healing equal to 30% of your max health. Can be dangerous to play with if not timed right. It involves you summoning your minion and then dismissing it. You can pick this up if you're afraid your healer won't be able to cope with big damage that's coming on you. There are certain places where I've tried it out and used it, and it's not bad if timed very appropriately. The issue is if it's a point where you're taking lots of heavy damage, then do you really want a 30% of your max health shield after healing for 50%? I don't know. It's questionable, right? So I don't really play with it. Death Grip slowing enemies, you can just Ice Chain after you Death Grip, right? You can even macro them together. Maybe the speed boost, but basically this is really what you're going to run. Take this point out, flip it wherever you want, right there, and you can run either. I would say one less stun because AoE disorients are so good in so many of these dungeons, and then you could put that in reduced Icebound Fortitude cooldown, or having your Chains of Ice affect one additional nearby enemy. If you're running with a group that normally historically has issue with spitefuls on that week, I would say that would be good. But overall, that's the specs. Made this video because I've seen a lot of people who talk about how like this is a waste talent, this is a trap talent, this is not bad, this is good, you should take this. And I don't think that's true. Right? Now, should you take my advice? I hit the wrong button. Right? Should you take my advice? 2441 rating, and that is completely pugging. And anyone who pugs really any key above a 16, Ruby Death Pools, man, this place is so rough, who pugs keys over a 16, they're going to tell you that getting to 2400 rating as a tank, playing with nothing but pugs, you're probably going to develop depression and an alcohol dependency because it is very rough. You don't have to take my advice, but if you're someone who wants to get to 2400 rating as a Death Knight tank, or if you're just looking for a little bit of information, maybe to improve your play, hey, it can be done following these strategies.